All right, listen, Tom. My question was about this Columbia University Ahmadinejad visit. You know, they said they would invite Hitler if Hitler was around, and I'm listening to this university president, and it almost makes me want to throw up. You know, I've talked to so many of these pseudo-intellectual, let's go drink at the coffee shop and discuss all the world's ills. Why do? Help me understand this pseudo-intellectual. We're better than everybody else and we've got it all figured out. How does that work exactly?
Well, Rick, here is my opinion over the years, and I'm ashamed in a way to be associated with such pseudo-intellectual snobs. People like Bob the gardener, who calls you regularly, is a much more wise man who has brilliant insights and shows a true knowledge of politics and life and puts academe to shame. But anyway, I think it's two reasons. Number one, the country has so promoted college education as if you go to college, you're a superior human being, a higher breed whose brain is so great that you are one of the gods of the earth who can tell all of the low-life peons who've never gone to college what the truth is, which is such a crock of crap. It's just the reverse. That's number one, Rick, the condescension that the country has fed over the years to college graduates. Not that there's anything wrong with being a college grad. Number two, I found that Cal State Long Beach and other public institutions were really little socialist enclaves working in a sea of capitalism, and we forget it's hardworking people who are out there doing jobs and who have to earn their keep or be fired in the true great free enterprise system. That's what props up the socialist idiots and gives them the massive funding, and they begin to think that they're just the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they fail to see the disconnect that they are only there because of the goodness of the taxpayers who work their butts off to keep them full of money that they then waste. So I think those two things, Rick, the socialist disconnect with capitalism and the pompous arrogance that society has wrongly given to college graduates. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I've always been, a lot of people, I'm called a hick or a rube or this or that or the other thing. And I'll bounce this off of you, Tom. I went to school like everybody else, got my associates, then I went on and got my MBA, JD, and then I did some other things, traveled extensively both here in the United States and abroad, negotiating offshore oil concessions on behalf of American companies with communist countries. And back and forth and negotiated timber rights with various Indian tribes on behalf of Weyerhaeuser and so on. But I have some of the deals we would work on, whether it was in Sao Tome or Indonesia, wherever it happened to be, we'd be a top price waterhouse for a year working on one deal with people that would just as soon slit your throat ear to ear on May Day as look at you. But we had a common goal that we could pursue, so we were able to work together. Now, I have learned, and I've always found this to be true, whether I was atop a price waterhouse or I was trying to negotiate with Jakarta or Occidental Petroleum or Petrolus or Shell or Gulf or whoever it happened to be, I have found that if I open myself up intellectually, I can learn just as much from the guy pushing the broom in downtown New York after one of their community parades, which they have a lot. If you sit and talk to this guy long enough, he may not be of any consequential financial means or, well-bred or whatever the pseudo-intellectuals like to say. But every human being has knowledge to impart. They truly, truly do. Some of the best advice I ever got in the world was when I first started in the business and I would talk to these old ranchers, going out to negotiate whatever it happened to be. And, I tell you what, we'll get to that in just a minute. Help me unload the truck and then we'll talk. Leaning up against the truck, talking to these old-timers, or in downtown New York, talking to these people that were born and bred New Yorkers, maybe didn't have, maybe didn't even graduate high school. But every single human being I've ever encountered, I could learn something from if I would simply prepare myself mentally in that moment to really listen to what they were saying. Every bit as much as whether it was the head of some department of some country or negotiating some offshore deal. I mean, I've truly I guess that's what drives me crazy about these pseudo-intellectuals. It's though if you didn't have a resume, an academic resume 3 pages long, you weren't worth talking to. Does that make sense?
Rick, that makes perfect sense. The real lessons of life are learned in the trenches and living your life, not going to school and college. And one of the greatest ladies I ever knew, who sadly died a couple of weeks ago, my dear, dear mother-in-law, was the sweetest, wisest woman who imparted invaluable lessons on how to live your life as a kind individual, yet have principles to stick up for, and yet treat everyone kindly. That woman was a saint, and she barely graduated high school. People like that are what keep this country together, and the fools that I work with, most of them in academe, are a bunch of narcissistic, arrogant, stuck-up sons of guns who've become so impressed with themselves, their heads have gotten bigger than the damn Goodyear blimp, and they're too dumb to realize what fools they are, even though they're full of book learning. So, yeah, Rick, what you say makes perfect sense.
Well, Tom, listen, I appreciate the call and continue to fight the good fight, shaping and molding the young minds of America. I appreciate the call very, very much. Duncan Hunter, Congressman Duncan Hunter, most of you within the sound of my voice know who that is. He issued a statement yesterday morning, direct to Columbia University. And I'll quote it because it was sent to me late last night. To host the leader of Iran when he supports terrorists that are moving deadly roadside bombs across the Iraqi border to be used against American troops is a slap in the face for the entire 165,000 men and women in Iraq, and to those that have served before them. If President Lee Bollinger, the president of Columbia University, follows through with hosting the leader of Iran, I will move in Congress to cut off every single type of federal funding to Columbia University. If the left-wing leaders of academia will not support our troops, they, in the very least, should not support our adversaries. I'm going to read that again because this makes a lot of sense. I will move in Congress to cut off every single type of federal funding to Columbia University. If the left-wing leaders of academia will not support our troops, they, in the very least, should not support our adversaries. This event, following the slanderous action of MoveOn.org, depicting General Petraeus as General Betrayus in the New York Times, represents the emergence of the extreme left wing in American politics. Concluding, I think it is time for the Democratic Party to denounce this fringe element in their party. Now, this really says everything that I've been feeling and thinking for a long time. I said earlier this morning, it's coming to a point in America where I fear some Americans more than I fear the terrorist, because I know at least what the terrorist agenda is. If the radical left wing in America, if the extreme left wing in American politics is not held in check by their own, then someone needs to do it. And as Duncan Hunter said, if the left-wing leaders of academia will not support our troops, they, in the very least, should not support our adversaries. Now, you would think that would be like falling off a log. You would think that would be common sense. If you're a free American living in the United States of America and you won't support our troops and their safe return, the very least you can do is not support our adversaries. And the emergence of the extreme left wing in American politics has to be stopped. And the only people that can stop it are you. They should be denounced. They should be publicly censured. They should not be allowed to use the Constitution and the Bill of Rights against itself. And I've been preaching that gospel for the last 3 years. All right, we'll take your calls. 5:43 to time. Should Ahmadinejad be allowed to speak at any American university, let alone Columbia? And if they do allow him a platform, what should be the consequence? Your calls next.